2021 was a crazy year, filled with a lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of ups and downs. At least that was my experience of 2021. And looking back, I think that was kind of the comic industry as a whole experience of 2021. So I thought, what better way to put a final point on this year by counting down my top 5 best and top 5 worst from the world of comics in 2021. So we're going to be counting comic books and anything associated with comics, shows, movies, whatever. Is all eligible for my list as long as it has to do with comics. So that being said, let's just jump in with the number 5 best from this year. James Tynion's run on Batman. Now, James Tynion's tenure as the writer for Batman actually began earlier than 2021, but it ended this year. So as of this year, we can kind of put a grade or a verdict on his entire run from beginning to end. And really that verdict is it was pretty damn good. He took Batman, who had been pretty much wrecked by Tom King, making him just kind of a weird, broken, sad man-child, and he brought Batman back to his ass-kicking roots. He introduced a lot of good characters, gave us some really good events, Joker War, Fear State, and it was very transformative. Batman lost his fortune. He's got new allies and new partners and even a few new villains in this storyline, but he never lost the center, the core of who Batman was. And that's what I think the fans really appreciated about his time on Batman. So really, just congratulations to James Tynion on wrapping up a very successful run on a long-running DC staple. And unfortunately, that brings us to the number 5 worst of this year, and probably the most controversial entry on this list, I'm guessing, or the one that's going to get me the most flack based on the review I posted of it earlier this year. The Eternals was a bad movie. The Eternals is a bloated, overblown, horrible misstep of the MCU. Too many characters, too many flashbacks, no real villain. The script asks giant, huge questions that it has no power to answer. It's boring. It's meandering. It's a bad film. It's number 5 on this list for a reason. I stand by my original review. Eternals is just a bad film. And moving on. Number 4 best from this year, King Spawn. So in 2020, Spawn broke the record for longest running indie comic, creator-owned indie comic with issue number 301. And leading up to that with issue 300, Todd McFarlane brought together like the best talent working in comics and put together a gorgeous comic book. And then he followed it up by doing the same thing with issue 301. And then earlier this year in 2021, he gave us Spawn's World, which was going to be this big launching point, this big advertisement for what's coming into the world of Spawn going in the future. But King Spawn was where the rubber finally was going to hit the road. Was all this hype going to be worth it? And the answer was yes. This book lived up to all that hype. It brought Spawn back to his just violent, visceral, dark roots and gave us a grisly, supernatural story with great villains, visually interesting artwork, and just Spawn doing what we love Spawn doing. So it was a big win for Todd McFarlane, and I think a big win for the comic industry, and it was just good to have Spawn back. So way to go, King Spawn. Number 4 worst of 2021. The Hellfire Gala was an enormous waste of everybody's time. The X-Men parading around in clownish costumes that look like rejects from the Milan fashion runway as they meander through an 18-issue summer mega event where they accomplished nothing except putting on X-Men prom and having nothing come out of it but a slightly tweaked roster on the X-Men. So really, did we really need to see the X-Men hanging around with Conan O'Brien and Kevin Feige only to lead into the nothing burger that was the trial of Magneto? I don't think so. So the Hellfire Gala has a very well-deserved place on this list and is not the only X title to land here. So let's see how they fare throughout the year. So number 3 best. For all the lows that was the X-Men in the Hellfire Gallery, we have to talk about X-Men Inferno, issue number 2. Now, this entry is a little curious because as of this recording and as of the end of the year 2021, Inferno is only about halfway done. We've got issue number 3 just came out a few weeks ago, so this is going to continue into next year. But issue number 2 of Inferno is probably the best single issue comic book I read this year. So I know there's been a lot of controversy around the Jonathan Hickman run on the X-Men, whether or not he's just turned them straight into villains, he's taken them too far away from their core concept, but he had planted a lot of storyline seeds that are coming to fruition now in Inferno, which is his crescendo, his exit to from the titles. And number 2 is just a masterclass in writing of intrigue, manipulation, political backstabbing, and betrayal, as we see Mystique using all of the tools at her disposal to not only resurrect her lover Destiny without the permission of Xavier or Magneto, but then manipulate the Quiet Council into voting Destiny a place of leadership on the island of Krakoa as a member of the council, and basically taking all the reins of control away from Charles Xavier and Magneto. This was a great story, a masterclass in brilliant writing. And if you've kept up with the X-Men at all, I can't recommend Inferno enough. I'm sure it's going to be on the list next year unless it has some kind of catastrophic failure in the last 3 issues. But that brings us to the number 3 worst of 2021, John Kent's Superman. I'm not talking about a particular storyline or an issue or even a comic. I'm talking the character. John Kent's Superman is the worst. He used to be this fun, awesome kind of preteen Superboy character. He had a really fun, lighthearted title where he would run around with Damian Wayne Robin. The two of them would kind of get in these misadventures. They were funny. They played off each other well. It was really lighthearted and a fun book to read. And then Brian Michael Bendis came on the Superman titles and aged John Kent up to a young adult. And now he's just a drag. And I want to make one thing clear. This has nothing to do with his identity as him identifying as LGBTQ. He's a new character. He's never really had a romantic storyline or history in the MCU. So if this is the direction they want to take him, then that's fine, as long as they just make it interesting is all I ask. But no, his sin in the comic book universe is actually he just takes the fun out of it. Whether he's lecturing the U.S. military on how they need to do better, or bottling the city and people of Metropolis into a shrunken Kandor-like state because that's the only way he knows how to defend them, or marching for climate equality with a bunch of protesters, he's just the worst. His comic isn't fun. He's preachy. He's lectury. He is just reminds us of all the stuff that we read comics to get away from. And I can't help but think that the driving factor when writing his stories is just to get social media clicks. I think he's an awful character. I think he's terrible for DC Comics. And I would love to see a storyline where they retcon that this character is just some failed clone by some mad scientist and the real John Kent is sitting in suspended animation somewhere and can be brought back. The kid that we all kind of really enjoyed reading, because I just can't stand this guy anymore. Now we need something to clear our palate after that. So let's go number 2 best, and that is The Me That You Love in the Dark. What a fantastic story this was from Scotty Young. This is the story of Ro, an introverted artist who is suffering from creative block, and so she rents a house in the middle of nowhere that's haunted by a strange, almost fairy tale villain-like entity. It's a story of just darkness and isolation and relationships as she grows closer and closer and closer to this entity. And as their relationship grows from friendship and then beyond, the real darkness of this thing is finally shown its full force. This was a very compelling book, in my opinion. I loved every issue of it. I'm sure we're going to have a trade come out in the near future, but I really encourage you to get the individual issues because this book is just begging to be made into a Netflix property or something, so there might even be some value in the books over time. Fantastic story, great artwork, and just a fun read, very reminiscent of a Stephen King or a good Dean Koontz book, something to read on a cold night. The Me You Love in the Dark can't be recommended enough, just if you want to read something new and something different out in the world of comics. Now we go to the number 2 worst. And I tell you, I had the idea of writing this list back in October of this year, and this was going to be number 1, but things change. I Am Not Starfire and Unearthed, the Jessica Cruz story. We're just going to lump these together as a twofer and just call them DCYA because I can't decide which one is worse. These are 2 terrible books. One gives us Mandy, possibly the most unlikable character in the history of comic books. Starfire's ungrateful, brat, pretentious daughter who runs around insulting everybody, judging everybody, including her mother, and then wondering why nobody likes her. She has plans to become an anarchist. She is just a foul Mary Sue of a character who stumbles through the entire book just being the worst. In the end, she develops powers, and her first act is to defeat a major supervillain, Blackfire. This book was terrible. The only thing that I can think of that's as bad was Jessica Cruz Unearthed. This was just a straight open border propaganda project. This has nothing to do with the Green Lanterns, nothing to do with the Jessica Cruz that you know and love. This was a writer inserting her politics and just getting paid to do it. Both of these books are put together by writers who have no real knowledge of the comic industry or how comics work. Amateur hour artwork, and really just a waste of everyone's time and effort. I don't know where DC thinks they are going with these books, but they're here, and I really hope I never have to see them again after this review. So let's go to the number one best thing from comics in the year 2021, and that has to go to Spider-Man No Way Home. Yes, it's a movie, not a comic book, but honestly, had it not been for Spider-Man, I probably just would have put the 2021 MCU on here, because we had kind of the lackluster disappointment that was the Black Widow, the okay but could have been better Shang-Chi, and then the disaster that was the Eternals, and then along comes Spider-Man and fixes everything. The No Way Home sees Spider-Man going up against basically the cast of villains from his original movies, the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire series. But the interesting twist is he's not just fighting these villains, he's actually fighting to save his own rogues gallery. What a fun story. What a great idea to bring all these actors back and putting them back in the roles that they made famous in the Spider-Man movies, and just see how they all fit right back into them. Jamie Foxx was great as Electro. Willem Dafoe, I had forgotten how great he was as Green Goblin. He's even better in this movie than he was the first time around. Alfred Molina, I always thought nailed it as Dr. Octopus. Before this movie, Spider-Man 2 was my favorite Spider-Man movie. This movie fires on all cylinders. It completely hits, in my opinion. It's the closest we're probably ever going to get to seeing a real incarnation of the Sinister Six on screen. And it's just fun at a movie theater, which is not something that people really get to experience a lot of these days. So if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend going to see it. It's my top for this year. And that brings us, sadly, to the number one the worst offender in the world of comics 2021. That has to go to X-Men Green. Oh my Lord. I didn't see this book coming. And now that it's here, it is the worst thing that I've read in my memory, period. So X-Men Green takes the kind of sweet altruistic character of Nature Girl, and kind of through her just in observing humanity's treatment of the environment, turns her into a weird, horrible, bloodthirsty murderer with a stick through her head. So not only that, she doesn't just go on a killing spree, just murdering people like grocery store workers, college students, and oil refinery workers. But in the end of the day, the X-Men don't even want to get involved until they're threatened with a lawsuit. And then when they do, they kind of feel bad that they have to bring her down. So bad, in fact, that in the end, they just let her go with more potent weapons to go out and do it all over again. X-Men Green is just a writer throwing his personal politics into a comic and putting it out there, just like I said before. It's terrible. It's not only a bad comic, but it almost makes you feel bad reading it. Who are we supposed to root for here? The X-Men Green characters are murderers. They're not just killing supervillains. They're not the Punisher. I mean, she's killing just blue-collar workers, people that punch a time card for a living. The other character, Sauron, he's involved because environmentalism is ruining his plans to turn humanity into dinosaurs. And then the other kid there, the little pink kid, is just there because he likes murder. I mean, this is a terrible series, a terrible book. And then it leaves you with the threat at the end of X-Men Green will return, but please don't. You well-deserved number one worst pick of 2021. And there it is. That's my list. Top 5 best and worst. What did you think? Did you agree with my list? Would you have done something different? Did I omit anything? Granted, I don't read every comic. I try to read a lot, but I'm sure there's probably something out there I missed. Let me know in the comments below what you think, whether you thought I nailed it, whether you thought I left something out, or whether you thought something didn't belong there. And before I go, I just wanted to say one of the things that I kind of thought of while I was putting this list together was the thing that comic books really offer people is a chance to be able to kind of escape the garbage that we have to deal with every day. And in the last couple years, dealing with pandemics, losing people, losing jobs, all the other stuff that we've had to go through, it's nice to be able to just pick up a comic and read a story where the worst problems that the world faces can be solved by people in capes flying and punching them. So I really hope that these creators in comics realize kind of what their job is. Their job isn't to megaphone their political beliefs at us and write the comic that they just think that we need. We just want them to write the comic we want to read. So, we talk about essential workers, and whatever you think about that phrase, to somebody who's just having a really tough time at life and they pick up their favorite comic and it entertains them for 15 or 20 minutes, you're an essential worker in that moment. So I really hope that the professionals in the comic book industry kind of think of that going forward as we go into 2022, and they, give us the offerings that they're going to give us the next year. And the one last thing I want to say is, in this last year, one of the highs for me was this channel reached 1,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough. You have helped this channel grow from just kind of me ranting to nobody to me ranting to you 1,040-ish people. So I thank you all for your support. I hope that the channel continues to grow this year. I've got a lot more stuff planned, and that is all. I'm going to leave it there. So have a happy new year, everybody, and we will see you next year with more rants and reviews. Take care. Bye.